All right, so here we're here to talk about video games and the internet. Now, I'm here with Kyle, and we have I think we both have a fair bit of experience in video games, and
We do.
maybe an hour or two online, um,
Just a couple.
in our history. But I'm not. This might be something we actually disagree about, so could be an interesting conversation. Um, I've I've come to be increasingly skeptical of the positive trade-off of the internet, because I don't think anyone doesn't believe that the internet is a trade-off. Everyone acknowledges that there are problems with the internet, but the argument is that, like, well, the benefits sort of outweigh the negatives. Um,
Sure.
and
Yeah.
I'm increasingly skeptical of that. But I'm curious, where do you stand on the internet, and perhaps we'll get into video games specifically being a net good or net bad thing?
So I I'm glad that you actually wanted to start bringing up the distinction. I think there's a big distinction between video games and the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Even though there's incorporation of both in both products now, it's kind of cross platform now from internet into video games and vice versa. Considering Farmville was everything my mother was addicted to on Facebook forever, and that's just a social media platform.
Well, and you
Um,
could argue that all of social media has been gamified with likes and
oh
comments
yeah,
and so forth.
oh
So
yeah.
the
There's
line
definitely a
gets
reward system.
blurred a little bit.
Yeah, there's definitely a reward system, but overwhelmingly, yeah, the net positives can't be overstated. Like the ability to be able to communicate with people across the world, the transfer of information at lightning speeds, the ability to understand a lot of complex situations rather quickly because we have a wealth of information literally at the fingertips. We can even Google with how evil they have become in recent memory. When I grew up, they were literally teaching us the basics of Google in school to show us literally just the catalog, uh, like the ability for them to catalog information. And it wasn't, in 1492, stormtroopers came over on the Death Star and took over America for, the good of Nepal. It's not any kind of crazy nonsense that you see in a whole bunch of weird forums. It was literally just cataloged information. It's like, hey, when did, Columbus sailed the ocean blue? 1492. It was a very simplistic matter of fact when I was younger. It's only more of a recent issue that I'm starting to see some of this absolute nonsensical side of the internet, where uh, what do they call it? The fake news and the misinformation generation that we're living in, where it's kind of a juxtaposition where we can learn things on the internet where and this is always where it's hard for me to describe kind of the contemporary political strife that we're all suffering in. It's because everybody says don't trust your lying eyes, because we can literally pull up a full like the fake news or the misinformation on the media for the whole uh good people on both sides thing for Trump. Okay,
Right.
that was
Being
that was
Rupard.
yeah, that was easy to dispel. You have to rewind the tape by 10 seconds. And so the news media is saying don't trust your lying eyes. See, we gave you the full video. And then the thing on the internet we also see is the things on Twitter they'll give us a 30-second tape of a police officer shooting someone, and don't worry, just don't trust your lying eyes. And both
Yeah.
sides seem to be hitting us continuously with just absolute barrage of half truths and full lies.
So it sounds like you're saying that the internet is barraging us with the illusion of knowledge because it's giving us information, but the
Without
information
context.
is inherently decontextualized. And it's not just inherently decontextualized because it's edited, it's inherently decontextualized because we are experiencing it online. Like, the fact that we are experiencing it online inherently decontextualizes it, even if we were to see all of the relevant information. The experience of it would be different, in the same way
Well, yeah.
that an argument on Facebook via text where all the words are said is different than when if you hear it from the person and you hear their tone and see their facial expressions and so forth.
And I don't know a single person who hasn't gotten into a fight with either their significant other or a friend or a family member who they texted something and they took it wrong and it wasn't implied in the way that the text came across. So
Exactly.
and with the internet, I feel like we're getting into a range. I think you and I were talking about a little earlier. Now it's just all it is a place to sell things. Okay. Every news site, everything, every forum, every video has a sponsor. It always has commercial. It always has ads. It is only now a place to sell information
Well,
or experience. And
and it
that
had
taint,
to
and I
be
feel, and I feel,
sustainable.
yeah, and I feel that it's tainted the entire body of the internet for the cataloged information that it was supposed to be, where we would have this ability to have information at the touch of our fingertips, and instead we get sold everything at the cost of not only our attention, but also at the cost of literally just buying things. Just shit. How often do you
Yeah.
do we even the people who are the best intentioned tend to sell like supplements and NordVPN.
Yeah.
So like we're being sold on a constant basis, and I think that's why my generation, I'm 30-ish, and it's in the younger 30s where my generation is starting to get to the point where we just reject ads, like advertisements to us. If you advertise to us, like we are less likely to buy your product.
So this is an argument, and I'll try to be as articulate as I can after the better part of 6 shots of Jim Beam here. This is something that Matthew Crawford pointed out with the problem with the oversaturation of automated advertising and automated attention seeking on behalf of companies or people or organizations or whatever, is that in order to fend off that overstimulation, we have to basically shut down completely. We have to put on our sunglasses, put our earbuds in with our music to tune out the world. And we actually lose the possibility of genuine connection because we've shut down against that overstimulation. Like there could be an ad out there that is marketing exactly the product to fill your actual need. Marketing isn't inherently evil, but certain modes of marketing are so easy to abuse that it sort of dilutes the whole world. Not just the world of marketing. Literally, it dilutes the entire world.
I think
That's what we
I
experience
think
it.
that I think that's a perfect the route for a lot of people who actually do follow video games to really start pushing into the kind of the side nature of what kind of the downfall of what the internet is. And it's the advertisement and the selling of goods that more than likely don't fit the needs that, one, they're advertising, and two, that actually fit your needs.
Right.
And what I mean by that, so how I have a genuine question for you. It is, how much do you follow the video game world? And this may go into an economics thing. What a surprise from being stated by me. But how often do you follow the world of, let's say, video game politics, news, and information?
So I used to follow Day 9 in the StarCraft world, and I used to follow the professional Dota scene actually in my early 20s more closely than I am proud to admit. I haven't followed it very closely in the last 4 years though. I haven't followed it very closely. I imagine it's getting quite it's going the direction that all of these professional sports things tend to go, which is more corporate, but I don't know any details on that.
So it's kind of an interesting world, the video game marketplace anymore. And it's because we have, overwhelmingly, we have about 4 or 5 different topics that I would always love to talk on when it comes to video games. And yes, a part of that is the vying for attention, and that is talking about live service games. Mm-hmm. So live service games has become almost a necessity if you are going to play video games in the modern world. You are no longer playing Skyrim. You're no longer playing Super Mario Brothers. You're not getting a game and being able to sit down, play through it, enjoy it, have fun with it, and call it good. Instead, you are playing these consistent 100+ hour games that will, I'm going to use Assassin's Creed Odyssey as a good example, as well as Valhalla. Valhalla is the newest one. What they would actually do is they created a little bit more RPG stance into Assassin's Creed. It's no longer sneak up on a guy, hunting down one singular target, getting through the guards, killing him, and finishing the mission.
So it's like a Final Fantasy kind of thing.
Kind of. It's now
Okay.
you're directly wandering through the world, and then you come across encampments very similar to Far Cry, but with an RPG stick to it. You have to fight people, and I can come up to behind somebody and stab them in the back of the neck, and it will do 1,200 damage. But I didn't know that this one particular enemy has 15,000 health, so it did nothing. So now I have to continuously beat him down for the next 10 minutes just to be able to kill him. And the problem with that is that it requires level scaling. And I don't have a problem necessarily with RPGs. They're a great time. I used to play KOTOR. It was one of my favorite games. But when every single game is now having an RPG feel to it, to where it has to have a leveling system, and you have to do this consistent grind to be able to get anywhere, where they intentionally downplay the amount of experience that you can get per enemy in order to sell you XP boosters in the in-game store.
Oh, interesting.
Okay. And so that's kind of where we're starting to run into, like, okay, how are they making money? All of these games still cost 60, and now for the new generation, now that the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox, I believe it's Series X, that's what it's called now. Xbox did a really funky thing with their name, so I can't even keep track of Xbox anymore. But the Xbox Series X and the new PlayStation 5 are now going to be selling games at $70, even though some of these industries are the most profitable they've ever been.
Still cheaper than plywood.
Yeah. But they're now, it's gotten so bad that they are creating problems to sell you the solution to, on top of already, and this is because they've learned from the past where they're not getting as much money from intentionally cutting out a part of the story to sell it to you as DLC shortly after sale.
Right.
And then it's because also loot boxes are being outlawed in many, many countries because of the Star Wars Battlefront 2 debacle. So the video game world and the marketplace, it's not just necessarily for attention. Again, it's bleeding over into the internet's necessity and incessant selling to you on every single stage of the game.
Yeah. So I've been thinking a lot about the spirit of the internet, and in the last couple of days, and I feel like a part of it, and this touches on what you were just saying, is that a lot of the internet people believe that the internet should be free. And this doesn't just mean that we should be free from music copyright law. It means like literally access to the internet and the bytes that people create and put out there should be freely accessible. That is the spirit of the internet. And it goes along with this sort of the anonymity culture as well. But one of the more valuable insights of the sort of conservative political ideology is that there is no such thing as a free lunch. And I think that the internet, the spirit of the internet, this idea that all of these things should be free, that these things should be, we all have a right to this information, is a grand self-delusion. And the internet the internet businesses play into this in a sort of, I believe it was Schopenhauer who made the argument that the spirit of technology itself is to commodify things, to turn trees into boards waiting to be used, to turn water into jugs of water ready to be used for other things. And eventually that tendency will come for people too, that people will be commodified. And I get the growing sensation that the video games are not the only vector for this, obviously, but the internet as a whole is the commodification of people in a truly global scale, and in a liquid way, because you can take people from anywhere in the world in a way that you couldn't before. And the illusion that you're getting this stuff for free is sort of the mechanism by which these companies get people to give you your attention. And I have a particular memory of this, because back when I was sort of going through the motions of Christianity as best I could. I worked security at a local church, and I remember we had a weird night where suddenly a bunch of cars were driving through the parking lot, and our head of security was freaking out. He's like, "There's like singles and pairs of guys in cars coming through the parking lot, stopping for a few minutes. The engines don't shut off, and driving off again." And there were like a dozen of them. And we were like, what on earth is going on? And then one of our guys was like, hey, they're on their phones. All of them are on their phones. What's going on? And I can't remember if it was me or one of the other guys was like, did Pokemon Go just release a new update?
Oh God.
And that was what it was. It was a Pokemon Go update, and all these guys were coming through because churches were gyms in the Pokemon Go game. And so they were all coming through. But the crazy thing about it is that Pokemon Go, and this is going to sound like tinfoil hatty and conspiratorial, but I'm pretty sure this is pretty public knowledge. I don't think this is controversial to say anymore. Pokemon Go is basically a crowdsourced global mapping operation. You can map the interiors of buildings and roads and stuff by gamifying people traveling around and exploring. And that was that. Well, that was how that was funded, because it's not
the opposite way. It's the opposite. So so Niantic is the creators of Pokemon Go. And prior to creating Pokemon Go, when they were hired by the Nintendo Corporation, they actually had a game out prior to Pokemon Go, and it was literally just, hey, map all the places in your, like the popular destinations in your area. And that crowdsourced mapping technology is what helped create Pokemon Go. And so it was kind of, it's what you are saying, but the opposite roundabout is they did that in order to create Pokemon Go so they could create something colorful and imaginative and give you a reason to buy shit, such as the berries and the Pokeballs and everything like that. It gives you a reason to get up, go walk around, and go to these already pre-established crowdsourced mapped locations and go search for Pokemon with a limited amount of goods that you would have to buy or participate more in the game in order to do. And each click and download actually means money for Nintendo and Niantic.
Well, it might begin on that foundation, but I think it was also continuing the mapping process, because
yes,
as an electrician, I've been inside server rooms, which are not like the big internet hubs, but sort of micro hubs for particular businesses and so forth. Those are expensive rooms.
Yes,
there's so much money in those places. Just the fire equipment for in case those very, very warm rooms catch fire. Just the zero oxygen fire systems for putting out fires in those rooms are expensive, let alone the servers themselves and the electrical and everything else. And like we take the internet for granted because we don't see the world beneath the world. We don't see the infrastructure that's supporting our ethereal digital experience moving through the internet, and that has to be paid for, but we don't see it. And the internet has become genius at disguising the cost and at getting us to pay the cost without realizing it.
Yeah, I actually had this kind of conversation. It was kind of, this is a small tangent. It was a buddy of mine that I had met a few years ago, where he was talking about how electricity should be free, and he was quoting Nikola Tesla. Yeah, and I'm sure you've heard that phrase before, and like whenever you hear about it, you just think of like, ouch, that hurts my spirit for you to say. And it's because even if, let's say, electricity is free, one, you have to take in associated cost. Okay, wires. Are wires free? Is copper
so
free?
Expensive.
Yeah. Are all the associated costs that go into just creation of electric? Who is going to donate said materials? Who's going to donate their labor to go mine said materials? Where is this crazy, amazing place that you? Yeah, it's like, where's the person who knows how to do all this stuff? And is he just donating his time? Of course not. And that's very simple. Of course not. All these people who know how to do these things. A lot of this is complicated. Yeah, I've been in plenty of server rooms, and man, they're hot as hell. And it's absolutely astounding how much information is getting put into one server room. But still, all it is becoming is essentially just selling. It's just selling goods, and they're giving a reason, and they're giving and getting a reason to get people up and going to go buy things, which is, hey, we want money for Pokemon, and we also want you to map things for us. So we are going to pay you with video stimulation, and you're also going to pay us for the privilege to use it. And so it's kind of this weird, it's always a double dunk, where it seems to be that every single dollar is going to be ripped out of your hand at a moment's notice. And money velocity in the world of economics is a good thing. Like, to exchange money is a good thing. It helps support the economy. On the other hand, there is a point where our generation, we are becoming slightly immune to advertisements. And on top of which, we're becoming resentful. People are actually, on top of like the standard boycotts that we have for like, oh, this person isn't woke enough, we're going to boycott your business. Or, hey, Coca-Cola wants anti-white training, the Republicans are going to boycott them. On top of the standard market issues that and potential boycotts that every business has to deal with, they now have to deal with the fact that a lot of millennials are becoming resentful for you putting advertisements in our shows, in our YouTube videos. And especially if we see the same video like 10 different times in 2 videos, we are significantly less likely to buy your product because we now hate you as a product and a person.
Well, we say that we are. That's certainly how I feel when I see the advertisement. But the marketers who do put that information out there have a whole lot of data on that. And the terrifying fact is that when they look at the data, they say, no, you don't. you think you're in the moment, you're angry, but you're not actually any less likely. In fact, you are still more likely. And this goes hand in hand with the equally terrifying observation that many Silicon Valley persuasion architects have discovered, which is that the guys who program social media apps to be maximally addictive in terms of our time and attention spent on them, they say, you'd think that if you understand the techniques and the tools that go into making these things addictive, if you are literally the ones putting them into the program, if you know about it, you'd think you'd be immune to it. You're not, because they're designed to work on humans, and we're humans too. And you think, oh, I see what they're doing. I see that they're just trying to program me with repetition, and I hate it. And it's like, you think that's what's happening, but you don't even understand your own brain as well as these marketers do, which should be horrifying to people. That should be terrifying. You are literally in less control of your body than these marketers are, in degrees, obviously.
So
but
I'm
it's
not saying that they're not able to pull more money more quickly. Keep in mind, you also have to understand the like population density and population increase with the ability to market to more people simultaneously is going to necessarily bring in a net benefit to them. The difference is that people like, and I know plenty of people who are like me, we actually don't buy EA products anymore, Electronic Arts video games. Okay, I don't buy EA products. And it's because they are so bad with loot boxes, grinding, creating problems that you're going to sell me a solution to. And even Ubisoft, which is the creator of the Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, and a couple others.
Ubisoft made good games, I thought.
Huh?
I thought Ubisoft made good games.
Well,
have they gone downhill in the last 4 years?
Significantly, and it's because they keep making the same 3 games with a series of skins over them. So you have Ghost Recon, which is an open world collectathon where you're shooting things and you're in the military. You have Far Cry, which is the same game, but in first person. Ghost Recon is in third person. It's a gigantic open world collectathon where you're shooting people, but you don't work for the military. Then you have Assassin's Creed, which is an open world collectathon where you are an assassin, but it's not even an assassin anymore. And then you have the Watch Dogs Legions or Watchdog series, which is an open world collectathon. that cuts things out and sells you solutions to. And then you have what else? What else do they make? So like the Ubi. But the overwhelmingly you have a continuous live service that is always being sold something to. And I don't have a problem supporting a good game. I used to support Blizzard quite a bit, but they didn't. You could always tell when something was being made after the fact and added later on, versus it was being made at the same time, and this is made to be cut out and sold to you just simply for a little extra scratch on the side. And EA is pretty much doing the same thing. It's just all first-person shooters anymore from EA, and any other group that isn't first-person shooters, they normally buy out the platform and then kill the studio that was attached to it. That's one of which is Dead Space. Dead Space got shut down because it wasn't as profitable, and it's because they bought the studio, changed the entire feel of the game, and then just killed the studio. So you're seeing a lot of these video game giants, the publishers, just buying up more and more and more independent studios to get the intellectual properties that they create, and then just creating the exact same system that they know will sell to more people, which is encouraging more and more people to not buy these games. So Assassin's Creed, yeah, it sold really, really well because it's being advertised to more people, but a lot of people are new to the series. They're not returning players because they didn't like Odyssey, they didn't like Origins, and they didn't really like Valhalla. They're new players coming in because they're advertised and this is so cool that they want to get it, and a lot of people aren't liking it. And on top of which, and I'll say one more thing before I'll let you in, is the fact of where I think the societal collapse of the United States really came from is two issues. One is the death of Harambe, which his 5-year anniversary just passed. Rip Harambe. But mainly in 2016, which was Gamergate. And Gamergate is essentially the ousting of video game reviewers. Video game reviewers who are taking, basically bribes or insider information that would essentially get them to give better scores for video games that didn't warrant it.
Well,
sorry, there's a motorcycle outside my house.
Yeah, no, you're fine. I would say that if Gamergate and a real world conflict in an unreal world led to the societal collapse of the United States, perhaps that would be a collapse worth having.
No,
because
that's a misunderstanding.
I feel like this is I'm familiar with Gamergate. I'm sort of making a humorous point because it does feel as if Matthew Crawford had this great line. I can't remember it offhand exactly, but how in The World Beyond Your Head, he described how it felt as if we were moving towards an ethereal existence completely disconnected from the physical world, a sort of digital experience of life. And video games, there is an argument that video games are inherently bad. And I'll be interested in your take on this argument that they are inherently bad because they are not real. It's a vicarious experience in an unreal place that it's escapism. It removes you from the physical world and its real problems. And of course, there's a counter argument that
I could say the same thing for reading.
Well,
any
perhaps
fantasy or fictitious book.
Well, right, and I've had a fun time making an argument that there is the potential for video games to be high art, high literature specifically, and I made the case with Skyrim in particular because it pays a lot of homage to old Greek and Roman and Nordic especially stories. Beowulf in particular. Anyone who's played Skyrim knows that the center of the map, the world tree, to borrow from Campbellian language, High Hrothgar borrows from the old king in Beowulf. And it's Campbellian to the point that there's literally an in-game text called the Monomyth, which is the alternative name of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. So there's a lot of fun tethers to the outside real world culture in the game. And like you said, books are inherently disconnected in that same way. But there's an experiential difference, I think, in the participatory nature of it. It's a visual experience rather than an imaginatory experience. And I think the clinical evidence for this is the rise in and what I'm about to say here is,
crime.
if I say what?
If you say violence.
No. I'm not doing what's his name's move here. No. What I'm about to say here is a little speculative, but the rise in depersonalization syndrome and derealization syndrome. And depersonalization refers to feeling like your body isn't yours, like you're a robot and you're not in charge of your actions anymore. And derealization feels like the world around you isn't real, like you're living in a dream or a simulation. And these are real experiences that people have, and they seem to have grown a lot more common in the last decade or two. And I want to emphasize the speculative nature of this, that I wonder if this has something to do with internet usage. Because if you spend more time online, Heraclitus said, we are what we repeatedly do, famously. If we're spending more time online and we're experiencing causation more in the digital space than in the real world, then we'll go through our real world interactions, driving places, buying coffee, talking with our parents and our friends, waking up in the morning, making coffee, like all the basic mundane shit we will experience as things just happening to us, because our mind and our attention and our experience of causation exists in the digital space, which would then feel more real. And that's not the sort of thing that you would experience with a book. So I think there's a difference in that experience and its effects on our brains.
So I'm gonna try to come up with a delicate, articulate argument to simply persuade you with the idea that that is such a boomer argument.
It's a boomer argument. I'm not a boomer. I'm not a boomer. Okay. It's crazy. What's crazy? So I'll say one more thing relating to this. This is a total millennial Gen Z argument, because I was totally unfamiliar with that connection, even as a possibility, until I was working with another electrician, an actual journeyman, but my same age. He's actually, I think, a few months younger, but in any case, he who was describing this to me because he experiences these things. Now, he attributes them in part, if I remember correctly, to drug use in his youth, which he seriously regretted, salvia in particular, which is a pretty hard-hitting hallucinogen for those of you who don't know.
Oh, come on, go big or go home.
But he did say, even though he cited salvia as a possible cause of this, that from the stats he'd read, this was on the rise among millennials and Gen Z. And the idea that this boomer argument, boomers largely aren't even aware of this stuff. As far as I'm aware, boomers are the primary market for Farmville lifestyles.
They are.
So this is something that I think
my mother really got into Farmville. So yeah, boomers.
The awareness of the problems associated with the internet seems to actually be something that Gen Z and millennials are more in touch with than boomers. Boomers will look down on internet usage, like, back in my time we didn't have this, but they don't actually, they don't seem to have the awareness of why the internet is bad in the way that Gen Zs and millennials do.
So I actually disagree with that. So and I think it's because most Gen Z that I actually do know, they don't see a problem with the internet at all, because they grew up with it as a natural part of their life. A lot of the Gen Zs that I do, Yeah, I mean, a lot of these Gen Zs that I know, a couple of them are the oldest Gen Z they can be is at 23 right now. They only grew up knowing the internet. So if they, you can't really say that they're like, well, they know what's wrong with it. No, not really. The only thing they really know to a huge degree of what the internet is, a lot of times, is social media. And they don't really know the huge capacity that the internet holds because they only know of kind of the corporatization of the internet. We know or like they know eBay, they know PayPal, they know Google, they know, Facebook, like the small forum pages and the internet chat boxes that I used when I grew up. Like the only way to have a private message with somebody on the internet that you didn't really know was not like Omegle, where it'd be like we couldn't even get video when we first got into it. We didn't have an internet capacity that could hold it and maintain it.
Right.
So Omegle was well out of the scope of what we were able to do. Instead, we would just have, Woman Hunter 69420 at
Such
like,
an Omegle name.
I know, right? In like the AOL chat box. And
yeah.
We would just see big lines of text of a whole bunch of people having a conversation, and you could like, oh, I'm going to try to find this one person.
So my argument isn't that all Gen Zers and millennials understand the problems of the internet. I'm saying that the boomers who look down on the internet don't understand it. And among the Gen Z people who are suspicious, which is, I would agree with you, smaller than it should be, they're more in touch with the problems. But the majority of Gen Z people still are asleep at the wheel a little bit.
Sure. And the vast majority of people who are in their older ages, probably like the older Gen X's and, the people on the, I would actually say like boomers is kind of a derogatory term because like the boomers are pretty much dying, like their 80s and 90s. And more often than not, when we think of boomers, we're thinking like in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And like, that's not boomers. That's like before that.
Right.
So like the aging generation of the, people like my mom, who's I believe about to, I think just turned 60. Oh God. Like they're starting to get to that point where they're pretty much a part of the internet because they have to use it for work. They use it at home. They have to use it to talk with their grandkids or their kids. And, they use the internet on such a regular basis that they understand it. The difference is that it's not a necessity to them still, comparatively to Gen Z, where it's almost a necessity to live.
You can't get by without it.
Yeah. And so this is where I look at kind of the difference between the aging generation. I believe it's called the silent generation. The silent generation, Gen X's, myself as the millennials, and then some of the older Gen Z's that I know, the difference of what they see the internet as and how we always see older people getting scammed on internet nonsense. Okay. And the reason for it is because, they're not so engrossed because they are not
savvy.
They're not internet savvy yet. They know how to use it, but it's not part of their
haven't been initiated.
Yeah. Versus like if you ask any Gen Z, like, hey, how's that Nigerian prince doing? They instantly know what I'm talking about. And
it's
they probably have never even gotten an email from a Nigerian prince asking you to forward money because he just inherited his kingdom. They've probably never been given that email because that's a Gen X and an older millennial email that we used to get. And these guys probably have, like the Gen Zs haven't, but they still know it because that's part of internet culture.
Right.
So like when Washington State unemployment got scammed by a literal Nigerian scammer and a Nigerian prince scammer kind of thing, it's like, how? What, really? This is a 20-year-old joke. Are you kidding me? How did you screw this one up? But I think it's the fact that they don't really understand how money grubbing a lot of the corporations can be, and because of the visual stimulation that they're not initiated into the internet as much as Gen Z is, they're the ones who are spending a whole bunch of money on, random little, upticks on Farmville or small things where younger kids can just spend money on a video game because they want something. They don't understand how money works.
But don't you think
it's the people who are slightly too young to understand finances and the people who are too old to understand what like the computer advertisements are doing for like the games.
Right, but the internet isn't a static place though. And don't you think it's naive to think that because you understand the nature of Nigerian princes and their devious dastardly plots, uh, that you're immune from the the money hustlers online? I mean, the
No, I don't know.
in video games, the DLC and the purchase the solution to the built-in problem strategy that you were talking about before
And
seems like exactly the sort of Gen Z targeting thing that boomers would be immune from largely.
yeah,
And but it works. And they do it again and again in skin after skin in different games that are the same function with a different sort of story coat because it works. And they do the same thing with Facebook and these other things, although the way they make money is slightly different.
yeah, and right now, like a lot of Americans have a lot of money in their savings account. I don't know if you've seen the recent statistics. I think it's like out of like Americans have 1.9 trillion dollars in savings right now. Like
Wow.
American, yeah, they're it's a lot of savings, and Americans are not spending money, and a lot of that is because COVID, everything got shut down. What is there to buy other than food? Like I can't get a PlayStation 5 right now, even if I tried. Same thing within an Nvidia RTX 3090. I can't get that shit. Nobody can, because scalpers got it all, and they're selling it at markup. And if you're not willing to buy from scammers, you're not going to get it anytime soon. Same thing with
All right.
PlayStation. Um, but since we have so much in savings, this is ripe for video game opportunists to go after and getting the loot boxes, to get those kind of cut it out to give you the XP boosters, and to give you these fraudulent games that are getting ever and ever closer to mobile game styles, where we know the mobile games where like, oh, pay $99.99 for 50,000 coins to buy
Well,
chances at Candy Crush.
hold on a second. I feel like we're sort of accepting a premise that we shouldn't be offhand. So you're a gamer and I've been a gamer. Why? What would be your argument for games being a valuable use of time or a legitimate hobby that isn't just wasting your life away in escapism, sort of in the first place?
Sure. So one, all right. I want to make sure that I don't prep this as just like, oh, this is the young kid who wants to defend his gaming habit. Tell that to my StarCraft profile. But in
Okay.
general, like again, it's really hard to not bring up the idea that you can do this with any style of argument. Like, can you read too much?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, you can. What if
Yeah.
you waste your entire life just reading? You haven't accomplished anything.
Right.
Okay.
I
And
would
you've
I
just
would
gone.
argue. I just put a video a few weeks ago about the dangers of over philosophizing.
Yeah.
It can be done.
And then also, what is like, just because something is a fulfilling use to you, doesn't necessitate that it's a use of life or a good use of life or the good life. I'm just going to bring up the statement. It's not the good life for everybody.
Right.
So you actually put out a video a little while ago of the benefit of exhaustion, I think it was.
Yes.
Yeah. So, you talked in that video about how, there is some kind of fulfilling pride to a hard day's work and coming home being exhausted.
Right.
The thing is, not everybody likes that. Some people fucking hate it.
Right.
And by that extent, as long as they're able to pay
It's an
for their life,
acquired taste.
yeah, as long as people can afford their own lifestyle, like if you want to sit there, like for my instance, if I
Mhm.
if I made enough money that I could just simply sit on my ass and play StarCraft all day long, and that's the only thing I did all day, who's to say that that's a bad life if that's what I value? It's not. As long as I'm able to pay for that habit,
Yeah.
that's
So
fine.
so the
Whether it's
argument.
a constructive life or not is something different, but there are genuine benefits outside of just being able to defend uh, some form of entertainment that you enjoy. whether
Sure.
that means celluloid or video games.
So there's a variety of factors at work here, and I want to differentiate the argument that video games are a bad use of time from the argument that we should ban video games, because the latter doesn't necessarily follow from the former. And
And yet
especially,
I'm still waiting for that option of video games are a perfectly acceptable use of time, and
well,
feel free to enjoy it as you see fit
so the fact that they're
in
enjoyable
moderation.
intrinsically is a pro, right? Enjoyment is good offhand, and we should begin with that, I think. And off of that, I've heard arguments made that actually, video game people with more than so many hours of time spent, especially with first person shooters and RTSs, there is like some, I don't know how confirmed this is, but some arguments that there's actually an increase in processing speed associated with people. Now, the direction of causation there is maybe questionable. Maybe just people with high processing speed naturally end up being good at those sorts of games and then do well and play them more. It might not be the other way around, but I haven't read into it very, very fully. And it's social. It's a great way to meet people. Sometimes can be.
I, I'm still really good friends with a Canadian that I met when I was in junior high.
Yeah, there you go.
And I met him on Halo 3.
And you could make arguments that develops certain skills, especially teamwork and communication. I follow. What's that?
Hand-eye coordination.
Yeah, perhaps. And but I think at the end of the day, it comes down to the intrinsic benefit of the pleasure, right? It's fun. Where I get caught up is in they are addictive. They can be and for some people more than others. I think it isn't just the game; it's also the person. I had to cut Steam out completely. I deleted my Steam account completely 2 years ago. I actually reinstalled it a few months ago to do some Skyrim stuff, but then I sort of lost steam on that, as it were. And
but I'm Tish.
Right. But the thing about Skyrim, because I played the crap out of that game. I have well over 1,000 hours in that game, with so many different kinds of builds and stuff. What I noticed, and this was even before I deleted Steam a couple of years ago, was that there were I would get on to Skyrim and I would begin to play, and after a certain point, it suddenly felt totally not worthwhile. And it was a very sudden transition from I know exactly what I'm going to do to I no longer, like, there is nothing I want to do in this game anymore. And I would leave it for like a month. And then I'd come back and I'd play for 5 minutes and be like, okay, I want to try this thing out. And after 5 minutes, that same feeling would hit me again. And it was, I don't know if you've ever experienced anything like that. I didn't tend to get that feeling as much with real-time strategy games. Maybe it's something about Skyrim where you're not dealing with other people, and so forth. But have you ever had anything like that feeling before, where you're playing a game and very suddenly you lose all interest in continuing with the game?
Yeah, and it actually happens to be pretty frequently and with a lot of games. And I think it's more modern games. So, and I think there needs to be a delineation between what I'm going to call, modern games. I'm going to say it's probably around 2014, 2015 games. I would say any game after, like, the post Gamergate games.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I know that and I know this is going to be like a weird delineation, and this is, yes, completely arbitrary timeline. Feel free to criticize me as you see fit. I think there's a difference between modern games and older games, where I would say Skyrim is getting to that point of an older game, because I think it's over 10 years old now. That
find out.
Yeah, feel free. Games that are a lot of more modern games, they're just there to, as I've been talking about, they're just here to excise money out of you at every turn. A lot of games beforehand, like, I'm a huge fan of Blizzard. They didn't necessarily do that a lot. Like StarCraft came out, and I played the hell out. I'll say StarCraft 2. StarCraft 2 came out. I played the hell out of it, and then I went away for a while. Then they came out with expansions. You know, it was first Wings of Liberty, then Heart of the Swarm, and then you went into Legacy of the Void. But these are two major expansions to the game, and the core gameplay remained the same. But they wanted
Right.
to expand the story and give you more episodes.
Side note, you were correct. Skyrim came out in 2011.
Bam. So, and they would just release the game and they would call it good. Same thing for Diablo 2. Same thing for like a little bit of Diablo 3, but Diablo 3 is just pushing into the modern generation. And a lot of these games were just they loved to develop it. Same thing with WoW and a lot of other things where it wasn't necessarily like, yes, there is a business plan to how to sustain Blizzard, but there's a huge delineation between how Blizzard is now that they've paired with Activision, and it's significantly more money grubby. And it's significantly more attuned to a live service. They don't actually make games for people to enjoy them. They want to cash in at every chance they can, and you can get this weird, different sense of feeling of it's
So explain something to
about
me.
money.
Explain something to me. Why would the amount of money in the business, why would the desire to earn money be at odds with the desire to create good games? It seems like those two things would work together rather than be opposed, right?
Sure. Okay.
Well,
So
like,
think about it like this.
there has to be some third factor.
Okay, I love to use this as an example because I've actually heard this question before. Okay, so let's think of a genuinely great game that people absolutely love to play. We'll use yours, Skyrim. Okay, Skyrim is an absolutely beloved game. Everybody I know pretty much adored the game. And here's a question for you. Besides, I mean, what do you need to buy to make the core gameplay enjoyable?
Nothing.
Just the game, right?
Yeah, I mean, I had rather the Dragonborn and the
Just the
vampire
core, like
DLC, but like,
not talking about the expansions.
yeah,
So we'll do.
I
the
never
expansion.
even used them. I had the Dragonborn and I never went the Soul Slide.
Sure. And so, but like the game was still, you put thousands of hours in, and all you had to do was an initial $60 purchase. Okay.
Right.
And it was a genuinely good game.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Okay?
Yeah.
There is a lot of games like that. Okay. The same thing with Super Mario World back on the SNES.
I've heard a lot of people say positive things about what's the Ayn Randian Fallout?
Bioshock.
Bioshock. There we go.
Yeah. So, and it's because the core gameplay doesn't need anything to be better. It is just the base experience, and it's amazing. The live service games require recurring purchases in order to make the gameplay, the core gameplay, at some points even enjoyable. So, for instance, I'll use Star Wars Battlefront 2, the most recent iteration, the thing that literally caused international backlash on loot boxes. And it's because Star Wars is a kind of franchise that everybody and their mom knows. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Name two people, and I'm gonna hold up one thumb and I'm gonna shake it when you get the name. Name two notable characters that I'm possibly thinking of in Star Wars. Name one.
Anakin Skywalker,
Also known as
Darth Vader.
There you go. That's who it was. And why? It's because they're the absolute most notable figures in the entire Star Wars universe. Okay. And yet you had to purchase Darth Vader. The first one, he just came with the game. Battlefront 2, you had to literally play the game for an excess of 40 hours in order to even be able to purchase naturally Darth Vader, or you would just have to pay an extra, I think it was like $10 to $20 to be able to buy the character.
So it sounds like the nature of your complaint is that they've become more audacious and ballsy in what they've been doing the whole time, though, which is like commodifying the enjoyment, right?
You're commodifying, like it's already commodified. It's a matter of, instead of giving you a reward to go for, okay, Like if you play this game for a good while, you get good at it, you beat it, you know, you get like little special hidden characters and you can replay it using this character. That's cool. The difference is that not a lot of people are going to play for 40 hours straight without spending any in-game currency to be able to purchase Darth Vader, who is the most notable, most sought after person in the entire game. Okay. They did it on purpose. They cut him out specifically, even though he was free in the first game, they cut him out specifically so you would have to pay extra money to get him in this game. So that's where it's these kind of scummy practices just to, I know that we don't have to do it. I know that we shouldn't do it. And I know it's inconsistent with our former practices.
Well, it's only scummy because it's breaking the fourth wall though, right? I mean, like we accept that practice with fast food. When we go through a drive-through and we get our burger, the restaurant, whether it's a McDonald's or Wendy's or whatever, they make no money on the burgers almost because the meat's expensive. They make all their money on the fries and drinks because fries are pennies and the drinks are even less. They're making their money on the meal upgrades. So like, and they're always asking, do you want to upgrade a meal to that? And they've gotten very good and systematic in upgrading those, you know, burger purchases into meals. And so we accept that practice pretty much everywhere else. But with the internet, we sort of grew to expect everything to be free. And so when those same practices in other parts of business come to the internet, it feels scummy. It feels scummy.
No, that's not what I'm going after here. It is a complete breaking, not just the fourth wall. You are breaking from a standard practice where if it's kind of a promise from the gamer to, or from the developer to the gamer that if you play our game, you'll get rewarded for it, not only enjoyment, but there's also a matter of achievement. You'll get something out of it. There is a prize to be won, not just the ending of the story, but now you can play it with a different character. And we had no problem with that. Okay, that is the standard practices in Skyrim. It's the standard practices in a whole bunch of games. But for you to pull out, you are literally creating the game, knowing full well what is expected of you, because it's you've created that expectation, and then you decide to cut it out and sell it to the same people later. You are creating a problem that you are now going to sell the solution to, and to boot, you're also giving us games more often than not that are actually unfinished. And that's my absolute chief complaint as of recent, is you are selling very similar. The most recent one and most notable is Cyberpunk 2077. You sold a game that is probably about 1.5 to 2 years away from being finished. And they believe that they can just keep updating it over the course of time and sell us a half-done product, probably more than half done, but it's a subpar product for full price that they promise to update later, and some of the times they don't, and a lot of times they don't.
Yeah,
I people buy it. I think the only redemption story that I can think of off the top of my head regarding a video game that actually came in subpar upon release and was fixed later on would probably be actually 2 games. Is it's a space game. Damn it! It's by Happy Studios.
Well, didn't StarCraft 2 do something like that with release dates?
No, not that I can think of.
I thought they were really, really behind schedule, and they were delaying it.
It was a game that was
to deliver, though. So
yeah, I can't remember the name of the game. It's literally on the tip of my tongue.
Yeah.
It was a really popular game because you could just land on any planet you see fit. It was procedurally generated. I just can't think of that off the top of my head.
Okay.
And it took years, literally years, to get it fixed to a state of play that is actually acceptable to the gamers. And then same thing with Siege. What is the Rainbow Six Siege, where it came in kind of broken, kind of screwed up, it kind of sucked, and then they just kept updating it and giving it more and more and more stuff to the point where it's actually probably one of the more popular shooters right now.
Yeah. Well, I think we're like, I understand your complaints, and maybe I took us on the wrong track by comparing it to fast food, but maybe it's comparable to fast food in another way, which is the inherent unhealth of most fast food that most people acknowledge. Like video games.
If you're going to use the fast food argument, my apologies for interrupting. The only way that you can make that a fast food comparable argument is if they intentionally made the fries smaller so you have to upgrade.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Well, I
That's
mean,
the only
that's
way.
yeah.
It's the Skippy's peanut butter argument. You keep putting that little bottom chunk bigger and bigger and bigger into the peanut butter jar, so we're getting less peanut butter, so we have to buy a bigger one.
Yeah.
And that comes off as scummy.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. But I mean, why are they able to get away with that? Right? Being people still buy it. And I think this gets down to the heart of the matter, which is the hijacking of the reasoning process that we were talking about earlier, where our stimulus response, we're drawn to these things. We know that they're addictive, and they're the pleasure inherent in them is part of the, while it's one of the inherent pros, it's also one of the inherent cons, or at least the risk. Before we started this stream, I it was shared to me, and then I shared it with Kyle, this new song from Bo Burnham called "Welcome to the Internet," and the refrain is, "Can I interest you in everything all of the time, a little bit of everything all the time? Apathy's a tragedy and boredom is a crime. Can I interest you in everything all the time?" And it's so simultaneously alluring and insidiously creepy, because you realize what's lost when it's framed that obviously. And of course, with Bo Burnham's sort of
Yeah,
Disney
it definitely has a
villain,
yeah, it has a Danny Elfman, or the guy who made Nightmare Before Christmas.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has that style of music to it. So that very heavy bump, 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 bump. So it's actually a pretty cool sound.
Yeah. But I mean, that's part of the problem with the video games too. And the power and the interest and the constant nonstop variety offered is is part of the allure, and might explain why people are willing to pay for games, even though they're being increasingly more brazenly gypped, as you've illustrated in how they're marketing and producing these games, with it, like less creativity and more like obviously just reskinning old concepts with and people still buy it just for the variety. And I wonder, I want to delve deeper at some point, maybe at a later date, into this experience. And I'm glad you had it too. I'm glad it's not just me, this feeling of this sudden feeling of disinterest in going any further in that game. And I'm curious if anyone watching this has had a similar experience. Comment below if you have. You've made it to this far into the conversation. And I do wonder if that's connected, because the addictive quality that's built into these games, and the old argument, of course, is there's no difference between an addicting game and just a good game.
There is.
But I think they're right. Oh, I'm glad you anticipated where I was going. I think there might be, in terms of what it opens in terms of predictable behavior for what we're willing to shell our money out for.
Yeah. So I mean, I can pull up example after example after example, because I follow the video game industry, not just because of, I play video games. I actually don't play that many video games anymore. I play like two regular and consistently, that being I used to play Heroes of the Storm, but I kind of gave up, and then StarCraft and a couple others. But overwhelmingly, it's that kind of addictive quality that you were talking about. I bring it up in FIFA and NBA 2Ks. And NBA 2K, it's an EA game that does it's basically the version of Madden, but for basketball games. NBA 2K21, I believe it was, and 2K20 were literally just reskins of the previous game. So much so that they forgot to paint over the 2K20 in like the background stand. So it still said NBA 2K20 when you're playing NBA 2K21.
That's
because
hilarious.
They forgot to reskin it. It was literally just a reskin. The same thing goes for FIFA, and the same thing goes for Madden. It's a lot of the sports titles are just every single year they'll put them out, and they'll just update the roster, and people will pay full price for this. And I don't understand why. And I feel that's an addictive quality, because they will continuously buy the same product. They won't play the same product over and over and over and over and over again. Some of them do. They love the game, but there's no real reason to pay for the same product twice when there's been no change. There's no real change except for an updated roster of a few characters. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. It's the same reason why a lot of people would say the same thing for Call of Duty. And I would agree with them, that a lot of the modern Call of Duties are just reskins of the previous year, and they're making very, very small increases, and you're selling the same game with a different reskin. Same guns, same play loop, same core gameplay. It's the same stuff over and over and over again. It's just reskinned. And they haven't really made any genuine changes worth buying for a good while.
Yeah.
But when I investigate a lot of these kind of industries, such as EA and Ubisoft, and even Blizzard now has gotten just miserable. It's really, really sad, because I enjoyed it so much. And that's why I think I researched the business so much on an economic scale. It is how is this feasible when so many gamers are turning their backs on studios? In the last, I think there was a report just recently, Blizzard had lost, like 30% of their entire game group, like their core audience, in the last 3 years. And it's really, really, like, how is that sustainable? And oh yeah, I remember, it's because every single game now that's coming out is a live service game that a core part of the experience is literally selling you upgrades in real money terms.
Well, I think this is
do you
why
want this bling for your gun, or do you want this chance to open a box to get a character that you really want?
Right. Well, this is why I brought up the fourth wall thing before. Did I already bring up Schopenhauer here? I can't remember if that was before or after. Okay. So the whole, like, the nature of technology to commodify things and eventually commodify people. I think what people are complaining about is that they were already being commodified, but the marketing departments have figured out what they can get away with as far as how much they have to hide the commodification. And if the game is sufficiently addictive and the whole system is sufficiently addictive, they don't need to hide it as much. And people are realizing how overt the commodification is, and they're complaining about how overt it is, but they're still buying it. But the commodification happened a long time ago. The commodification happened well before we were aware of just how brazenly these corporations think of gamers as resources, just money sacks to be harvested, never mind their actual enjoyment. And so this goes back to the sort of the question of whether or not video games are a worthwhile use of time in the first place, because while they are intrinsically enjoyable, there are so many other things that can be intrinsically enjoyable as well that don't have the same degree of addiction. I mean, obviously we wouldn't jump from video games to hard drugs or something like that, but
there was
you know
a
what I mean?
Difference, but there used to be a difference in the community, because we could see the developers, like the heads of these studios, literally on the game itself. We used to, like, the head of Blizzard used to play StarCraft and Diablo and World of Warcraft and Warcraft 3. And the reason that they made those games is because they wanted to make a game that they themselves wanted to play. And that is no longer the spirit. They are now making games to sell other things in the game to gamers for and with. So we have no illusion that the head of, like, Bobby Kotick, who's the head of Activision, we have no doubt that he's not going to be playing Call of Duty with us. But the guy who created Blizzard, we literally could find him on Warcraft 3.
So there's two ways you could.
The damage or the destruction of that spirit of gaming is more apparent than before.
Well, so there's two ways you could interpret it, though.
Say again?
And there's two ways you could interpret that transition. The first one is what you just described. They started one way, and then the new people took over maybe, and the industry changed, which is totally possible. But the other interpretation you could take, the other lens you could look at it through, is that the nature of gaming itself reached its logical endpoint. You could say it fulfilled where it had been going all along. And I get that people want to say, oh no, like the process got corrupted, right? It was good, and then it became bad. But what if the seeds of that, what if that direction had been laid from the very beginning in the nature of the game itself, because of the way that it plays on our attention and what it permits businesses to do to people? How much leeway it gives businesses. And you would say the same thing of casinos, right? The addictive nature of gambling is what permits casinos to take advantage of people.
I reject the notion. Like, I appreciate the argument. I do full-heartedly reject the notion, and I think it's because you are trying too hard to compare apples and oranges, and it's because
it's an analogy, so it's not perfect.
Yeah,
but.
And the people who are involved in the industry, who follow the industry, who enjoyed the industry and grew up with the industry, where even people like I can use another example, Doom Eternal and the most recent 2016 Doom. There's a reason, a very explicit reason, that the people who are in charge of id Software, which is the people who created Doom in the first place, they literally even said, we are not going to add any of the in-game purchase bullshit. We're not going to do that, because that's not the nature of what Doom is. That's not the nature of what id Software is. We create games that we ourselves would want to play. So the people who created the original Doom are still in charge of id Software. And that spirit has continued on, while people who have now taken over Activision, or taken over as over in charge of EA and a few other games industries, they're not creating games, they're publishing games. And these are just CEOs who are, mining wallets, versus people who are creating games. And I think those are two very separate places.
Well, what I'm saying is that I get what you're saying. Like the intentions of the early people were totally good. Like, granted, what I'm saying is that the nature of the medium of video games doesn't necessarily care about the intentions of its early people, much in the same way that the nature of, for example, epic poetry doesn't care about the intentions of its original rhapsodes, right? The nature of the medium is its own entity with its own tendencies. It's not good or evil in a willful kind of sense. It just naturally tends itself in a particular direction due to its nature. And the intentions of the original artists may or may not have accurately anticipated what that direction is. So with the best of intentions, they could have started something that was going in a direction they didn't intend, which is, I'm sure, the case with something like Wikipedia, to bring in a sort of peripherally related example.
I think the implementation of loot boxes is the best argument I can go against yours for, because loot boxes are made to be a gambling device.
What's a loot box? Oh, loot box. Okay, yeah.
I was about to hit you if you said, what is a loot box? I was like, oh,
I heard loop with a P instead of a T.
Okay, so. Yeah, a loot box. Mm-hmm. Okay, loot boxes are now, they're just gambling. That's all they are.
The same neurological effect.
Yeah, it's the same neurological effect.
Random reward.
When you have to purchase loot boxes,
oh god,
especially in games like FIFA and NBA 2K and Madden, where to be able to get a specific card that will unlock a player with specific stats, and this is given what is it, E for Everybody. When little kids are spending thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars, and when it's noted, hey, by the way, this is a children's game being sold addictive qualities for loot boxes and gambling mechanics inside of this game. Okay, that is no longer where I give credit to, well, it's kind of the natural inclination. No, this is a corruption issue. This is a corruption on what they're going to milk their players for, and they will take advantage of addictive qualities of games and just rob the spirit of the entire medium. The medium is for storytelling.
So you think if they had
similar way to movies, it's
so
just
if you had
interactive.
you're imagining a world maybe then where video game producers still exist and video games are advocated as a good use of time, but there are restrictions on the ability of video game producers to implement loot boxes, much in the way that casinos are restricted basically to Indian reservations on most in most states.
I want a more pure form of gaming where the merit of your game is what will dictate the sales, and the sales is the money you get. And anything you would like to add on to the game after the fact.
But what's your metric for the merit? What's your metric for the merit of the game?
The number of sales.
Couldn't that be a measure of its addictiveness?
No, because you would have to play it in order to get addicted to it, wouldn't you?
Well, right. But then it just comes down to marketing, which has a similar kind of psychological hackability factor that the addictiveness does it not?
So think of it like Witcher 3. Okay, Witcher 3 is noted as one of the best games, period. Okay, it will go down in history as one of the best games ever made.
Okay. I'll take your word for it.
If you haven't played it, I encourage you to do it. The reason that Cyberpunk 2077 was such a disappointment to so many people is not because of the marketing, because although the marketing was outstanding and it was really in your face, it was a lot, everybody knew about Cyberpunk 2077 coming out. The reason it was such a disappointment is because of the quality of the games that CD Projekt Red, who created Witcher 3 and Cyberpunk 2020 or 2077, they had created that, and the expectation of it was rather high. They anticipated yet another Witcher, just in a different universe. And that anticipation is what spoiled Cyberpunk.
Okay, I think we might be.
And
let's back up a second, because I think we're still arguing past each other here, because I'm still approaching video games as how are they a supplement or a detriment to real life? And you're approaching them as how good is the game as a game in its own right, which is a fair question. But
so I always get
you could have a really good game. I agree. That's still a detriment.
So to answer your question, I think my best answer is it used to be. It used to be.
And you believe that a good game tended to be a supplement to your good life rather than a detriment.
Yes, because a video game used to be an experience. Okay. If you go to almost any gamer who's probably over the age of 25, and you say, hey, tell me about your absolute favorite game on the Super Nintendo. Tell me about your favorite game, or tell me about some of your favorite moments. Yeah. Tell me some of your favorite moments in The Last of Us, or tell me what you're like. You haven't played the game. Like, there's a part of The Last of Us when you come across a giraffe. Okay, and it's a very moving experience. Same thing with plenty of other games like Fallout and a whole bunch, and Bioshock. The first time I experienced Bioshock, it's genuinely an experience. It's an adaptation to ideas that I never thought possible.
It's like a literary experience.
It is. And it's something that I never could have imagined on my own. If you've never played all three Bioshocks, Bioshock 1, 2, and Infinite, it's genuinely worth diving into, because this is an experience, not just a literary or a story experience, but it's a literal moment where you are interacting with this medium, and your choices get to kind of guide the story. Mass Effect is a space opera over the course of 3 games that literally challenge your entire perception of what it means to be a team and what like the universe is, and a whole bunch of other things. So it's absolutely phenomenal. And the way it used to be were those experiences, you in that medium. Nowadays,
Right.
it is no longer that. It is that fourth wall is broken to such a degree that we know full well you're not getting your money by giving us a story, the same way somebody sells us a book. Okay.
We were talking before about initiations and the shortcoming of novels and films is that they're passive. You're passively observing these things, whereas the one thing that people miss, I think, about ancient Greek drama was that the chorus was something participatory. Like the audience was not the audience, but sort of there was an element of the audience, usually a youthful element, that was drawn into the performance itself that made Greek tragedy participatory in nature. And that was a part of their initiation process. And there's this intense potential for that kind of participatory medium of storytelling in video games. And I wonder if the feeling that you're describing of people being taken advantage of in this way is the feeling of such a powerful medium of storytelling being so brazenly abused by just greedy corporate interests for such a low and it's not even like an ambitious end. They just want like, 20 grand instead of 10 grand. I'm making numbers up, but like I get that side of things, but as far as the experience goes, the experience of seeing these things, I mean, I'm sure both had that kind of like world changing experience in the form of a novel and probably in the form of a song as well. Like there are all variety of different mediums of entertainment, theater, opera, sports games. It's a weirdly underrated form of drama is WWE. Wrestling is kabuki theater.
Oh, hell yeah.
It is drama and it's well done, and it takes an intense amount of skill to do it well.
I
And
used to watch the WCW when it was still on.
right. And so there's all these different kinds of mediums for entertainment. And video games, I get the intrinsic joy that you can have in them, but the participatory nature of them in the context of a global world where there is no skin in your game, right? No one has any illusion that these corporations have any interest in your personal well-being. And if they did before, and then maybe this is what you were talking about, they were outcompeted by people who didn't, in a global marketplace. That was unsustainable for that kind of skin in the game to exist. So perhaps there's something uniquely dangerous about video games because of their participatory nature rather than their passive nature in terms of addiction and in terms of molding people as well.
And I would agree with that. This is something that I've been impassioned over for a good long time, and it's because it's something that I genuinely enjoyed not only as a child, but even into my adult years. It's a medium that I've genuinely enjoyed, especially in the storytelling element of it. Again, huge fan of this Fallout series and a huge fan of the Bioshock series and The Last of Us, and even especially Witcher 3. That is a masterpiece. And to watch it be destroyed by people who just seemingly do not care about the industry, who don't care about the medium, and who don't care about the fans, are the ones who are just pumping it for money and being
or the story
and destroying everything simultaneously. And it's disheartening. And that is why I'm rather impassioned over it. So if it ever seemed like I was like, oh yeah, you're arguing past me, it's like, I'm just mad.
Well, I wonder because we weren't originally just talking about video games. We were also talking about the internet in general. And I wonder if the movement from, those old N64 cartridges and, CD-ROMs, the first game I ever really played a lot was Age of Empires 2 on the PC. And that was a hard disk, that wasn't something you bought on Steam on the internet. It was
God,
a
you sound like a
non
boomer.
it was
God, you
an
sound like a boomer.
I feel like I'm becoming a boomer. These kids these days. But like, perhaps going back to our the content of our conversation we've been neglecting, the internet, that might have had some sort of effect on the nature of games as well, in this broadening web of connection that necessarily all of our connections have to be shallower if we're having more of them. And if there are more fish in the sea, well, there's plenty of fish, and we have less interest in investing and staying connected with um what are you doing with your finger?
I am searching for something online for
Okay.
more evidence. Because keep in
Okay.
mind, I'm on my phone this one time.
That's right. That's right. Sorry. So like if there are plenty of fish in the sea, this is I mean, to diverge from video games slightly, one of the problems with online dating, things like OkCupid or the very aptly named Plenty of Fish app. As my wife is fond of saying, you can't play test commitment. And it incentivized the medium of the internet, just the broadness of and the scope of it disincentivizes commitment. And whether that's video game producers to their fans, or whether that's even fans to particular video games, or to anything in particular, it seems like the nature of the internet itself has its own problems apart from the medium of video games as well. And those two seem to converge in internet video games.
I mean, it's kind of an oversaturation of pretty much everything in the market. There's just so many games that they have to compete for your attention to get any money. And in order for you to get any kind of to use like dating profiles, it becomes addictive on purpose. Even though like there's no real reason for a guy to use a dating application. I don't really know a single person who's actually found somebody to date somebody on a dating application. 95% of the time it's just bots, and it's people who are selling their OnlyFans. So I don't understand why men would even be on there anymore.
Yeah,
but I
or
digress.
women.
But there's such an oversaturation of everything right now that it's just trying so hard to get our attention that we
everything and anything all of the time.
Yeah. So yeah, the internet has kind of ruined everything for us. Like, although yes, the benefits are genuinely there, I don't think it is for the everyday consumer anymore.
Well, we've become the product for some other consumer. I don't know who's consuming us, because if everything's commodified, what's the who's the buyer?
Buying?
Right.
Yeah, because it's literally just people selling information to other people who sell other information in hopes that they'll buy their product. But to who? We don't want to buy anything anymore. Like,
do you ever wonder if the
millennials,
CIA,
especially, like, we don't.
Do you ever wonder if the CIA and the FBI gather intelligence on each other? It's kind of an amusing thought experiment to think about. Yeah, they would have to, right? But but when you think about it, it's the absurdity of it is amusing. But I'm sure that's what Silicon Valley data, what do they call it? Surveillance capitalism now.
Oh yeah,
surveillance capitalism is like, right? They're gathering information and commodifying because that's the nature of the thing.
Well, I mean, but I think it's I think it's more of an overtone of the society that we're in. We have so much free time because the productivity that we can output because of the internet, okay, has exceeded so far that we have so much spare time to just need entertainment in the meantime. Because a lot of us are objectiveless. A lot of people don't have religion. We don't have community. We don't have a reason to exist. And a lot of us are becoming a lot more nihilistic. So what the hell do you do in your free time? You dive into entertainment. So you have to have, billions of books. You have to have video games. You have to have movies and internet and just Hell,
A
Twitter.
second song is coming to my mind now after Bo Burnham's "Welcome to the Internet." It's a Stink Fist by Tool, talking about how you always need more intense stimulation because whatever happened before is no longer enough. Um, there's some really dark and weird porn rabbit holes people go down in that world.
Tell us about your porn habits, Chris.
ask Maynard. I'm married. I don't have that
No,
problem.
I feel in the current course that we're going, we're going to end up like the Drukhari from Warhammer.
The Drakari. Is that a Dark Eldar faction?
Yeah.
Okay. It's been a few years there.
Yeah,
We're revealing more things about our
yeah,
game.
I know, right? Going into Warhammer and StarCraft
Oh
and
god, yeah.
all the other stuff like that. Yeah, I mean the Dark Eldar, as you put them, yeah, the Drukhari, they're just insatiable. They just look for some kind of stimuli because they're essentially dead inside. They have to literally torture people to death just for any kind of enjoyment because they're so numb.
Right. Well, and I think that numbness might be related to that feeling of sudden disinterest in whatever video game I was playing before, and now I need something else. And the real world, as in the non-digital world, I'm going to distinguish the digital world from the real world for the sake of argument here. Doesn't seem to have that problem, which is not to say that people don't get depressed and don't get suddenly, overcome with feelings of despair or just weariness, jadedness with the world. But I think it's qualitatively different and it's quantitatively different too. I would guess anyways. I haven't heard, and this would go back to the whole depersonalization, derealization conversation, which again, speculative, more research needs to be done, all the standard peer review talking points on that subject. But it would be interesting to explore that. And I do think it's qualitatively different the way that video games and the digital life, the sort of ethereal world of perhaps this would apply to the white collar work environment too, the cubicle lifestyle as well. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Tends towards that feeling of numbness. And maybe that's what Fight Club was all about. The numbness that's coming from the end of history.
I mean, I hate to say this because we are kind of at the pinnacle of society at this point. Like, I don't think we'll ever be at the Star Trek Federation level. Oh yeah, I knew that was going to get a grimace from you. I knew it.
It's such a Fukuyama line.
I know. And yeah, I started reading into your book that's a thick book, by the way.
Which one?
The one that you gave me, the Fukuyama one.
Oh yeah. So the origins of political order is distinct from the end of history and the last man.
Yeah.
Which uncomfortably goes back into Nietzsche, because both of those concepts are borrowed from Nietzsche. But Fukuyama's argument.
So
Fukuyama's argument is that
the
liberals. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go.
Oh, I'll just be brief to explain to whatever audience might be listening to this. Fukuyama's idea is that liberal democracy would be sort of the final endpoint, which is not that nothing happens in the sense of day-to-day life events, but that there's no significant political change after the achievement of liberal democracy in the world, and that this would be largely a good thing, but it would have its side effects too. And one of the side effects he describes is the phenomenon of the last man, which is sort of an emasculated man divorced from the traditional male roles of protector and provider, because those have been outsourced to state institutions. And so we would need to do something to stay busy. And vicarious masculinity is one of the suggestions, one of the things that Jack Donovan goes over in The Way of Men in the context of the end of history. And The Last Man and the End of History is sort of the starting point of Palahniuk's Fight Club as well. And the argument is that video games are a symptom of the end of history and an expression of vicarious masculinity.
So, I mean, I kind of am on that line that we may be edging towards the pinnacle of society, and it's because we don't like a lot of our time is now spent just passing time, and we're not really working towards a lot of things. Like, hell, there's one amongst us who wants to go to interplanetary systems, so like Elon Musk, hashtag buy Doge, but the buy and hold. Hey, I've made quite a bit of money on my Doge. I don't want to hear it.
No comment. I have no room to speak on that.
I'm not going to say that I made 6 figures off of Doge, but I'm not going to not say that. So anyways, yeah, not kidding. But there's only one amongst us who really wants to, go to Mars. Like a whole bunch of people, but only one person is really putting their money where their mouth is. And because the American government doesn't want to, they're like, that's expensive. Screw that. And Elon Musk, like, nope, we're going to Mars. He's actually, hell, we even have the Doge space mission coming up. Not to continue harping on Doge, but we have the Doge space mission coming up next year. I think it were 2023. And it's just simply, I don't think we'll ever get to a point of the Star Trek Federation or the idea of utopia, because the very first thing we would do is destroy it.
Right.
So utopia doesn't exist for a reason. Like our inherent destructive nature prohibits it. Right. And when we're looking at things like, video games or even just passing time with movies, I've got a really good buddy of mine. He literally just watches movies like all day long. Because what do? We lack a lot of our life is lacking of objective.
Right.
And the more and more of us who our life is significantly easier because we can produce something so much at the hands of the free market, don't get me wrong, where our small little piece now creates an absolute metric ton of stuff for anybody and everybody around the planet to buy. Yeah. Our little net worth is small, but we contribute a lot. And then suddenly, what do we do with the rest of our time? And now we're arguing to get to a 4-day work week. God, what would you do with a 3-day weekend every single day?
Well, so this goes back to, I want to pull from Fight Club again. I can't stay for too much longer. I have to go and pack for the week here. But there's a scene in Fight Club in which they're in a car and they're discussing what the proper use of a life on the other side of this emancipation would look like. And 2 of the gentlemen in the back are asked, what would you do, basically? And one of them says, I'd build my own house. And the other one says, I'd paint a masterpiece.
I thought he said I'd write a novel. But yeah, continue.
Yeah, I mean, that would be in the same category. It would be in the same category. And what's tragic is that both of those things are eminently achievable in the modern world. There is no reason why a modern person couldn't build their own house. Like screw going to Mars, amazing as that mission is, it would be ambitious and a beautiful use of what time you have on this earth to build your own house or write a novel or paint a masterpiece. But most people don't do it. And I think most people understand. I'm appealing to intuition here. Maybe you don't share this intuition, but I think most people understand that there's a qualitative difference between the passive enjoyment of a video game or watching a movie versus creating something in that way. Like even creating a video game, a beautiful video game like Skyrim. I got into Skyrim because I was truck driving in the Midwest, which was flat. And I loved the beauty of the mountains in Skyrim. That was the majority of the draw for me. It was therapeutic mountains, And that's that is something that's the creation of beauty that our energy is being siphoned away from by the addictive
I
quality
mean,
of participatory media. That's the concern, anyways.
sometimes a lot of people just don't have the drive for it. Like I've been trying to write my book and I'm dead stopped on it because I don't know where to go.
It's hard.
And I still write essays on occasion, and I read a lot. So some people just don't have the necessity and the drive to do it, especially when. And the same argument, and I know that this is probably not to your point, but I find it to be kind of a watered down version of it. It's the same kind of argument that I hear with like, well, why don't the youngsters nowadays learn how to change their oil? Why? Because I can pay somebody else to do it. Why do I need to build my own damn house when I could literally have it created and built at a fraction of the time and a fraction of the cost?
Right. And it's, if you, and this goes back into, and this will probably have to be a whole conversation for another time, the sort of Ted Kaczynski argument against industrial technology and technology in general, is that the efficiency of industrial technology removes us from the power cycle of taking charge of our external environment completely, because it's not feasible at scale. And like you would probably pay more money to knit your own sweater than to buy one, just for the raw materials, for example. You'll probably pay more money and time to build your own house than to just buy one that's been built by professionals, even with the labor and the markup. Talk to you, because you don't know what you're doing yet. You have to figure it out as you go, and that takes time and that takes money. But the attraction of building your own house,
How many
or
2x4s am I going to go through just screwing up the cuts?
Right. And the attraction and the draw is not economic efficiency. It's the act of, it's the ability to create things yourself, and it's the power. And I think that problem of economic efficiency incentivizing outsourcing everything ties in with the commodification of everything, including ourselves, over time, that technology tends towards, at least according to Schopenhauer. So I have to go in a couple minutes here, but did you want to close on anything, or,
No,
or try to refute anything?
I think it wrapped it up very well.
Yeah, well, I'm sure we'll talk more about it, because we went over a lot of subject matter here.
Yes, we did.
So if anyone watching this had any thoughts or resources that might be interesting, feel free to throw them in the comments. It's always fun to see new information on the subject, because I don't think either of us are full-blown Kaczynskiites in going back to Luddite Amish living, but there are genuine concerns too, and it's hard to navigate the challenges of technology. Right. Reaping as many benefits while mitigating the costs as best as possible. So,
and if anybody is watching, I do encourage you to fully agree with me that Chris is in fact a boomer.
I think I still got 15, 20 years to go on that. Well, I don't think you can be a 30-year-old boomer. I don't think you can be a 30. I think you have to be at least 50. I got a couple.
I'm older than you.
Couple decades to go. Yeah, I'm getting there. I've got the grandpa phone to prove it.
Boomer life, man. All right, man. It's been a great time having a conversation.
We'll talk more in the future.